Mark raised his wine glass at his family's dinner table, his face already flushed from his third drink. His parents, his sister, and 2 cousins all watched him with amused smiles. To family, he announced loudly. The people who understand what real love means. Not everyone gets it, though. He glanced at me with a smirk. Elena here wouldn't understand. She's never been a mom. Never will be. The table erupted in uncomfortable laughter. His sister Brenda added quickly, trying to lighten the cruelty, well, she's amazing with dogs at least. More laughter. I forced my lips into something resembling a smile while my hand clenched around my napkin under the table. My stomach twisted into knots. The room felt too hot, too small, too loud. "Excuse me," I whispered, standing carefully so my chair wouldn't scrape. "I need to use the restroom." Nobody tried to stop me. They were already moving on to another conversation, Mark's laughter carrying above the rest. I walked down the hallway with steady steps, even though everything inside me was screaming. I locked the bathroom door and gripped the edge of the marble sink. In the mirror, my reflection looked pale, my eyes too bright with unshed tears. I could still hear them laughing in the dining room. They thought I was broken. They thought I was less than human because I'd never carried Mark's child. They had no idea. I took a slow breath and let the truth wash over me. They thought I couldn't have children. But I had a daughter 18 years ago. A beautiful girl I'd held for exactly 10 minutes before signing the adoption papers. Mark had no idea what I'd given up. He had no idea what was about to happen. I wiped the single tear that escaped down my cheek and reapplied my lipstick with steady hands. When I walked back to that dinner table, I was already planning. Every comment, every insult, every moment of cruelty was being stored away. My face was calm when I returned. Mark didn't even look up from his steak. Inside, I was done pretending. My name is Elena Harrison, and I've been lying for 18 years. Not to hurt anyone. Not for fun. But because some truths are too heavy to carry in the open. I grew up in a small town in Iowa where everyone knew everyone's business. My parents were deeply religious, the kind who measured worth in church attendance and reputation. When I was 19 and in my second year of college, I met Professor Nathan Cross. He was 42, charming, and paid attention to me in ways that felt like love but was really just manipulation. When I got pregnant, he gave me $500 and told me to handle it quietly. I couldn't tell my parents. Couldn't face their shame. So I moved to Nebraska under the excuse of a special summer program. I gave birth alone in a hospital where nobody knew my name. The adoption was open. I received yearly letters and photos. But I never told anyone, not my parents, not my friends, and definitely not Mark. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done. Mark and I met when I was 25. He was confident, successful, and kind in those early days. We married within a year, and the topic of children came up naturally. "Let's start trying," he said one night, his hand on my stomach. "I want a whole house full of kids." I wanted that too. But month after month, nothing happened. We tried for 2 years before seeing specialists. The doctors ran tests. Everything looked fine on paper. We moved to IVF. 3 rounds. Each one failed. Each one left me more hollow than the last. That's when Mark started changing. He didn't yell or throw things. He just grew colder. His smiles became rare. His touch even rarer. He stopped asking how I felt after each failed attempt. "Maybe we should take a break," he said after the 3rd failure. His voice was flat, emotionless. "This is costing too much." He meant money. But I heard what he really meant. I was costing too much. I was the problem. The joke started small. Little comments that he'd laugh off if I reacted. "Maybe we weren't meant to be parents," he said one evening while watching a diaper commercial. He said it casually, like he was commenting on the weather. He stopped holding my hand when we walked through the mall. When we saw couples with babies, he'd walk faster, like the sight physically hurt him. One night, I found a fertility brochure ripped in half on my pillow. When I asked him about it, he shrugged. Just cleaning out old stuff. But the way he looked at me said something different. His eyes held disappointment, maybe even disgust. The worst was a comment he made when we drove past a playground. He muttered, just loud enough for me to hear, "Maybe nature knows what it's doing." I didn't respond. I just stared out the window and filed that moment away in my memory. I was building a collection of every cruel word, every careless wound. I didn't know why yet. But I was keeping track. The first lie I caught him in was about working late. He texted me at 7 p.m. saying he had to finish a presentation. But when I checked our shared credit card statement the next morning, there was a charge from a sushi restaurant across town. We'd never been there together. "Mark, you went out to dinner last night?" I asked casually over breakfast. His face flickered with something, surprise, maybe panic, but he recovered quickly. "Oh, right. The team grabbed food after the meeting. No big deal." "Which team members?" "Elena, why are you interrogating me?" His voice turned sharp. "You're being paranoid. Stop obsessing over every little thing." I didn't argue. I just nodded and poured more coffee. But I opened a new note on my phone and logged it. Date, time, location, his reaction. I was building something, though I didn't fully understand what yet. The gaslighting had started. And I was documenting everything. 3 weeks later, at 2 in the morning, Mark's phone rang. I was half asleep when I heard him slip out of bed and walk into the hallway. He didn't close the door completely. I lay perfectly still, listening. His voice was low, almost a whisper. "I can't talk long." "No, she's asleep." "I miss you too." Then I heard it. A laugh. Soft, flirty, young. Definitely not his business partner. Definitely not any friend I knew. My heart pounded, but I didn't move. I reached carefully for my phone on the nightstand and started a voice recording. I captured almost 2 minutes before he came back to bed. He slipped under the covers without a word. I could smell cologne, the kind he only wore for special occasions. He didn't touch me. Didn't explain. Just turned his back and pretended to sleep. I stared at the ceiling until dawn, listening to him breathe. When morning came, I saved the recording in a hidden folder on my laptop titled simply, Proof. A week later, Mark came home at midnight smelling like perfume. Not mine. Something sweeter, vanilla and mint mixed together. I was lying in bed with the lights off when I heard him come in. I kept my breathing slow and even, pretending to be asleep. He moved quietly through the bathroom, showering longer than usual. When he finally slipped into bed beside me, the perfume smell had faded but not disappeared. He didn't touch me. Didn't kiss my shoulder like he used to. Just lay on his side of the bed, the space between us feeling like an ocean. I let one silent tear slide down my temple into my hair. I memorized that smell. I memorized how small I felt in that moment. How invisible. But I didn't confront him. Not yet. I was learning that silence could be a weapon too. Patience could be power. The next morning, I acted normal. Made coffee. Asked about his day. And logged every detail in my hidden folder. Mark's family hosted a summer barbecue in July. I made potato salad, the same recipe his mother loved. I smiled and chatted with relatives while Mark grilled burgers with his father. I noticed Mark's sister Brenda showing off a delicate gold bracelet. "Vintage," she said, twisting her wrist so it caught the light. "Found it at an estate sale." My stomach dropped. I'd seen that bracelet before. 3 months ago, in Mark's glove compartment. He'd told me it was a gift for his mother's birthday, but her birthday had come and gone without any mention of jewelry. "It's beautiful," I said, keeping my voice light. "Where was the estate sale?" "Oh, Mark gave it to me actually," Brenda said, distracted by her toddler. "Said he bought it for someone but changed his mind." I nodded and smiled. Then I excused myself to use the bathroom. Inside, I texted myself the details. Another piece of the puzzle. Another lie documented. The picture was becoming clearer, and it was worse than I'd imagined. The following Tuesday, I followed him. I wasn't proud of it, but I had to know. He'd said he had a client meeting in the afternoon. I left work early and waited in my car near his office building. He came out at 3 p.m., got in his car, and drove across town. I kept 3 cars behind him, feeling like a character in a bad movie. But this was my life, and I needed the truth. He pulled into a budget motel parking lot. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. 45 minutes later, the door to room 117 opened. Brenda walked out first, adjusting her purse, smoothing her hair. Then Mark stepped out. He pulled her close and kissed her like he used to kiss me. Long and slow, like they had all the time in the world. I watched my husband kiss his sister. The betrayal was so complete, so unthinkable, that I felt nothing. Just cold emptiness. I drove home in silence. No tears. No screaming. Just a strange, calm clarity. I opened my laptop and added the photos I'd taken to my folder. I made an appointment with Catherine Price, a divorce attorney recommended by my colleague. Her office was downtown, quiet and professional. She listened to my story without interruption, her expression neutral but her eyes sharp. "Do you have documentation?" she asked when I finished. I pulled out my laptop and opened the folder. Voice recordings. Photos. Credit card statements. Screenshots of texts. A detailed log of every lie, every suspicious charge, every moment of gaslighting. Catherine reviewed everything carefully. When she looked up, there was approval in her eyes. "This is excellent work, Elena. Most people react emotionally and lose their leverage. You documented everything. What do I do now?" I asked. "Don't react. Keep documenting. Open a separate bank account, start moving money carefully. We need to prepare for war, but he can't know it's coming." She paused. "And Elena? You're going to be okay. I promise you that." I believed her. For the first time in months, I felt something other than emptiness. I felt strong. I did something else too. Something I'd been afraid to do for 18 years. I contacted the adoption agency and requested information about reaching out to my daughter's adoptive parents. The process took 3 weeks. Finally, I received an email with their consent. Her name was Ava. She was thriving, an honor student planning to attend college next fall. The agency forwarded a letter I'd written. "Dear Ava," it began. "I don't know if you've ever wondered about me, but I've thought about you every single day since I held you. I hope you've had a beautiful life. I hope you've been loved the way you deserve. If you ever want to meet, I would be honored." 3 weeks later, I received a response through the agency. Ava wanted to meet me. The letter was warm, curious, kind. She didn't sound angry. She sounded open. I cried reading her words. But this time, the tears felt different. Not like breaking. Like healing. We met at a small park halfway between our cities. I arrived 30 minutes early, too nervous to sit still. When I saw her walking toward me, my breath caught. She had my eyes. My mother's nose. Her father's height, but my smile. She was beautiful and confident, wearing jeans and a college sweatshirt. "Elena?" she asked softly. "Ava." My voice cracked. We sat on a bench and talked for 3 hours. She told me about her adoptive parents, who sounded wonderful. About her plans to study environmental science. About how she'd always wanted to know me but was afraid I wouldn't want to be found. "I never stopped wanting to know you," I said, tears streaming down my face. I was 19 and terrified. "But I loved you. I've always loved you." She took my hand. "You're the woman who gave me life." I could never resent that. When we hugged goodbye, I held on tight. This was real. This was something Mark couldn't touch or ruin or mock. This was mine. Mark asked for a divorce on my birthday. There was no cake, no card, no pretense of celebration. He just handed me a gift bag while I was getting ready for work. Inside was an expensive pen and a set of legal separation papers. "This isn't working," he said flatly, leaning against the doorframe like he was discussing a broken appliance. We both know it. Let's just end this cleanly. I looked at the papers, then at him. He expected tears. Expected begging. Expected me to fall apart. Instead, I picked up the pen. I understand, I said calmly. Do you have a copy for yourself? He looked confused, almost disappointed. You're not going to fight this? Why would I? I signed the first page with smooth, even strokes. You clearly don't want to be married anymore. His confusion deepened. This wasn't the script he'd written. But I handed him the signed papers and went to work. He had no idea what was waiting for him. Mark assumed he'd keep the house. He'd mentioned it casually during one of our settlement discussions over dinner. He'd already been looking at apartments for me, small one-bedrooms he thought were appropriate for a woman living alone. When we sat down with lawyers, Catherine slid a document across the table. Mark's attorney picked it up, read it, and went pale. What is this? Mark demanded. Your signature, Catherine said smoothly. From the 2020 refinance. Elena paid off the remaining mortgage using her inheritance from her grandmother. In exchange, you signed over the deed. The house is hers. That's not, I didn't, Mark sputtered, flipping through the pages. You tricked me. No, I said quietly. You just didn't read what you were signing. You were too busy texting Brenda while the notary waited. His face turned red. His attorney whispered urgently in his ear. But the documents were legal, properly executed, and completely binding. The house was mine. And Mark had just realized he'd walked into a trap he'd set himself. Brenda called me 3 days later. I let it ring twice before answering. Elena, please, I need to talk to you, she sobbed into the phone. Mark's being so distant now. He barely talks to me. I think he's seeing someone else. I held the phone away from my ear for a moment, processing the absurdity. She wanted sympathy. She wanted me to comfort her about the man she'd stolen from me. Brenda, I said, my voice perfectly calm, I have nothing to say to you. But I thought we were friends. We were never friends. I hung up. That night, I blocked her number, her email, and all her social media accounts. I erased her from my life with the same ease she'd erased my dignity. Catherine had been right. Revenge wasn't about anger. It was about precision. It was about watching people face the consequences of their own choices while you walked away clean. The divorce negotiations turned ugly when Mark realized how much he was losing. He tried intimidation, showing up at my workplace, sending aggressive emails through his attorney. Your client is hiding assets, his lawyer claimed during mediation. She's being vindictive and unreasonable. My client is willing to be generous, but Mrs. Harrison needs to negotiate in good faith. Catherine opened her briefcase and pulled out a thick binder. She slid it across the table without a word. Mark opened it. His face went from red to white as he flipped through pages. Photos of him and Brenda at the motel. Screenshots of text messages between them. Credit card statements showing gifts, hotel rooms, and dinners. The voice recording from that 2 a.m. phone call. Everything documented, timestamped, and impossible to deny. You want to talk about good faith? Catherine asked softly. Let's talk about adultery with a family member. Let's talk about financial deception. Let's talk about emotional abuse. Mark closed the binder. He never made another threat. The court date arrived in September. Mark's attorney tried one last strategy. He attempted to paint me as unstable, obsessed with motherhood, unable to move forward emotionally. Mrs. Harrison has never had children, he said, his voice dripping with fake concern. She's dealing with significant grief and perhaps making irrational decisions based on that loss. Catherine stood. Your Honor, Mrs. Harrison would like to call a character witness. The courtroom door opened. Ava walked in, wearing a professional dress, her shoulders back, her expression calm and confident. She took the witness stand. Please state your relationship to Mrs. Harrison, Catherine said. I'm her daughter, Ava replied clearly. The room went completely silent. Mark's mouth fell open. His attorney shuffled papers frantically. Ava spoke about the adoption, about our reunion, about my strength and sacrifice. My mother gave me life when she was barely more than a child herself. She protected me by making the hardest choice possible. Anyone who calls her broken doesn't understand what strength really means. The judge listened intently. Mark looked like he might be sick. The judgment came down 2 weeks later. I was awarded full ownership of the house, spousal support for 5 years, and 40% of Mark's 401k and pension. The judge specifically cited emotional cruelty, infidelity with a family member, and financial deception in her ruling. She'd been particularly harsh about the IVF attempts. Mr. Harrison exploited his wife's fertility struggles while engaging in an affair with her sister-in-law, the judge stated. This behavior demonstrates a pattern of calculated cruelty. Mark sat slumped in his chair, suddenly looking much older than 43. His attorney gathered papers in silence. There was nothing left to argue. Catherine squeezed my hand under the table. It's over, she whispered. You're free. I walked out of that courtroom with my head high. Ava was waiting in the hallway. She hugged me tight. Proud of you, Mom, she whispered. Mom. The word I thought I'd never hear. The word Mark had used to mock me. Now it was real, and it was mine. Mark tried to return to the house for his belongings on a Tuesday afternoon. I'd changed the locks that morning, a locksmith working efficiently while I watched. When Mark pulled up, I was standing on the porch with a box. It contained his clothes, his toiletries, his electronics. Everything he'd need. Everything that was his. What is this? He demanded, trying to push past me to the door. Your things, I said calmly. The house is mine. The judge was very clear. You can't just lock me out of my own home. It's not your home. It hasn't been your home since you signed the deed over. I gestured to the locksmith, who was putting tools back in his truck. You can take the box, or I can donate everything inside. Your choice. He looked past me into the house, and his face changed. Ava stood in the hallway, arms crossed, watching everything. Mark grabbed the box without another word. He didn't look back as he drove away. Through mutual acquaintances, I heard about Brenda's situation. She'd moved back in with her parents after her husband discovered the affair and filed for divorce. She'd lost her job due to the scandal. Her father, a deacon at their church, refused to speak to her. She'd posted on social media about depression, about isolation, about how quickly your life could fall apart. I didn't comment. Didn't reach out. Didn't gloat. But I did feel a sense of closure. She'd helped destroy my marriage while wearing the bracelet my husband had bought her. Now she was learning that actions had consequences. I wasn't happy about her suffering. I was just done carrying guilt that wasn't mine. She'd made her choices. Now she was living with them. The same went for Mark. He'd mocked my childlessness, called me broken, made me feel worthless. Now he knew the truth. I wasn't broken. I never had been. Ava asked if she could spend the summer with me before starting college. She showed up with a suitcase and a nervous smile. I want to get to know you better, she said. If that's okay. We planted flowers in the garden. Watched old movies on the couch. Cooked meals together, learning each other's favorite foods. She told me about her adoptive parents, and I told her about my childhood. We were careful with each other at first, both afraid of saying the wrong thing. But gradually, we relaxed. We laughed. We shared secrets. One night, she was reading on the porch when I brought her tea. She looked up and smiled. Thanks, Mom. The words still made my heart skip. I sat beside her, and we watched the sunset in comfortable silence. This was what I'd been missing. Not a husband who diminished me. Not a family who mocked me. Just this simple, beautiful connection with my daughter. The one I'd thought I'd lost forever. Mark got fired in August. His affair with Brenda had become office gossip, and HR had launched an investigation into his behavior. Apparently, he'd been sleeping with his assistant too, a young woman named Casey who'd assumed she was special. When Mark tried to end things quietly, Casey leaked their text messages to the company's anonymous tip line. Messages where he'd made inappropriate comments about other employees. Messages where he'd admitted to padding his expense reports. The company forced him to resign. His professional reputation was destroyed. Former colleagues avoided him. Recruiters stopped returning his calls. I learned all this through Catherine, who had friends at Mark's firm. I didn't seek out the information. It just found its way to me. I felt a small, quiet satisfaction. Not joy. Not revenge. Just the simple knowledge that arrogance always finds its mirror. That cruelty eventually comes home. Mark had spent years making me feel small. Now he understood what that felt like. I hosted a housewarming party in September, officially claiming the house as mine. I invited colleagues from the library where I worked, neighbors, and Catherine. Ava helped me prepare, hanging lights and arranging furniture. The house filled with laughter and warmth. People brought wine and casseroles. My neighbor told funny stories. Catherine made a toast about new beginnings. When it was my turn, I raised my glass. To letting go of what never loved you, I said, my voice steady and clear. And finding what always did. Ava hugged me from the side. I love you, Mom, she whispered. The words still made my eyes sting with happy tears. I hugged her back, surrounded by people who genuinely cared about me. This was family. Real family. Not the people who mocked me while smiling. But the people who stood beside me when it mattered. Mark wasn't here. His family wasn't here. And I'd never felt less alone. I kept a journal during those months of divorce and rebuilding. Writing helped me process everything, helped me see how far I'd come. On the last page, I wrote this. I don't need revenge. Revenge implies you're still fighting. I'm not fighting anymore. I'm just living. Mark thought my childlessness made me broken, made me less. But I brought an incredible person into this world. I survived situations that could have destroyed me. I documented every lie, every betrayal, and used it to free myself. I'm not bitter. I'm not broken. I'm just done wasting energy on people who never deserved it. I closed the journal and looked out the window. Ava was on the porch, reading in the afternoon sun. She looked up and waved, and I waved back. My phone buzzed. Not Mark. Just a text from Catherine checking in. I realized Mark hadn't contacted me in weeks. Hadn't tried to apologize or explain. He was just gone from my life, fading into irrelevance. That's when I knew it was truly over. Not with some dramatic final confrontation. Just with silence. Peace. And the quiet knowledge that my life didn't end when my marriage did. It had been waiting to begin.